All right, so let's have a fantastic conversation here about the way that we can manage identities and access in the enterprise. So there's a few different ways that we'll enumerate here. One of the first ones here is the top bullet. And by decomposition, we can get into the discussion of a single sign-on. If you've talked about that throughout the week, one of the things that is the most important thing with single sign-on is, does it work? And a lot of organizations, they actually have a reduced sign-on, but not a true single sign-on. And usually it ends up being a massive project. Having done a lot of consulting over the past 15, 20 years, I can tell you that these are major projects for large companies that want help with being able to manage projects like single sign-on. So if you have big entities like that and already have a massive infrastructure in place, then there's a lot of money to be made in this business right here. I would recommend that you at least take a look at it and remember some of the things that we've talked about. Well, the identity management implementation actually interfaces with an LDAP environment. We talk about the port 389, port 686, or not, right? 636. So in order for us to communicate with the LDAP environment, we need to first stand up a directory server. So typically you'll see Active Directory as one of the primary directory servers that are out there. And once we do that, then we can start storing data in there for authentication purposes. So the implementation project usually is bought in by the senior management. They fund it, and then through the life cycle, we start to integrate apps, probably with the frequency like we talked about with some of the business continuity terminology. We'll bring on some of the least widely used software applications first. And they'll kind of be guinea pigs as we get into a battle rhythm. And then once we get into the battle rhythm, we'll start bringing on some of the more widely used. And then we have it perfected, we'll bring on the big dogs at the end of the project. But there's a couple of terms here that you absolutely will see on your exam. And it starts right here with this multi-factor authentication. So there's different factors that we can use. Something you can lose, something you can have cut off, and something that you can forget. Right? Those are the opposites of the way that it's traditionally taught with the something you know, something you have, something you are. So those are the different factors. And when we can get into the strength of those factors, and when we have a discussion here in a few minutes about the biometrics, you can get into the errors accordingly with the authentication. So we do that with being able to have accountability, and hopefully having this term down here that you see called a federated identity. Now that kind of sounds like something out of Star Trek right there, that federated identity. But the federated identity usually means something between organizations where it's been vetted, and you can trust that identity between organizations. Usually something like an OAuth, or open authentication. And then finally down here, you need something to help manage the actual credentials on the organization. And there's a lot of vendors out there that will actually make the hard credentials, and then some other vendors that will use systems to encode and print those as well. So there's a lot of good things going on in this industry, and it really touches many of the other things